In the 4-move checkmate lesson, we learned a new concept where black was checkmated by the white queen, and black couldn't capture the queen with the king because the queen was protected by the bishop on c4, like this. A king can never put itself in check, even when capturing. So many times when you checkmate, it's done by one piece who is checking and one piece that is protecting and assisting the other piece. Let's see some examples of assisted checkmates. In this position, white can deliver checkmate by using the queen to put the king in check with the assistance of the pawn protecting the queen. Can you see the mate in 1? If you found queen g7 checkmate, great job. The queen attacks the king, and the king cannot escape the check because the queen covers all of the king's escape squares and the pawn protects the queen, meaning the black king cannot capture the queen. It's checkmate. Game over. Let's look at another example. In this position, black's king does not have any legal squares. Notice that both the white knight and queen join together on the g8 square, right next to the king. White can deliver a check with the queen that is assisted by the knight on e7 with queen g8, checkmate. Now that you've learned how pieces assist each other in delivering checkmate, it's your turn to practice assisted checkmates. It's very rare to checkmate with just one piece. It usually requires several pieces to surround and finally checkmate the king. One of the most important examples of this is checkmating with 2 rooks, sometimes called the rook roller. Let's see how this works. In this position, notice the rook on c2 controls the entire c-file. This means that the black king cannot enter the c-file as long as the rook is on that file. Rook d1 checks the king on the d-file, and since the king can't enter the c-file, black's king is forced to move closer to the edge of the board. Now that the d-file is covered by the rook on d1, let's use the other rook to check the king on the e-file. Rook e2 check. Notice that the rooks take turns checking the king, cutting the black king off one file at a time. Let's watch the rook rollers roll the king up onto the edge of the board and deliver checkmate. After king f7, we bring the other rook to the f-file, checking the king. The king moves to the g-file. Now that the f-file is covered, we play rook to g2 check. The king is forced to the edge of the board and has run out of files. It's checkmate on the next move with rook h1, checkmate. The rook roller doesn't only work on files, it also works on ranks. Notice the rook on h4 covers the entire 4th rank. So in this case, we use the other rook to check the king on the 5th rank. And since the 4th rank and 5th rank are now covered by the rooks, the king gets rolled up the board again. King c6, rook h6 check, king to d7, rook to g7 check, and after king e8, rook h8, checkmate. Now that you've learned how to checkmate with 2 rooks against the king, it's your turn to practice checkmating with the rook rollers.